Thanks for having me. If you buy one book at this extraordinary festival, it should be this book. And I'm not kidding. Some of you know me as sort of over-enthusiastic and hyperbolic, but this thing was a revelation on so many different levels. Please welcome its author, Rick Kogan. Proud son of the North Shore, proud son of New Trier High School, and I would dare say more successful and smart than the mayor who graduated from New Trier as well. I'm down on him now. Rich, you came across this astonishing story of Sam Zemurray when you were a sophomore at Tulane. How'd you get to Tulane? I love this story. This is great. Scam time.
I'm a Cubs fan, and I was dealing with losing all my life. And then suddenly in 1985, the Bears 84 and 85 were incredibly great. And when the Bears swept through the playoffs and went to the Super Bowl, my father, out of nowhere, came up with 2 tickets to the Super Bowl, and I wanted to go down to see him in New Orleans. And the only way I can convince my parents to let me go was to tell them it was really going to be a college visit to Tulane University. And then when I got down to Tulane, after a while I started realizing it said Zemurray on every building, and that there was this big house that the president lived in of Tulane University. That's one of the most beautiful houses you'll ever see on St. Charles Avenue, and it had belonged to this guy Zemurray, who was this name you heard like among faculty whispered, and it reminded me of The Great Gatsby when they said, "Who is Gatsby?" "I don't know, but I heard he killed a man."
How deeply did you explore that curiosity at that point, though? That was not a lot of years ago, but some years ago.
Right. Well, you might know New Orleans, there are some distractions. So, but I actually took this class when I was a sophomore called Jewish American Novel, where really I was introduced to Saul Bellow, another a great Chicagoan. And I had this teacher, Joseph Cohen, not related to me, who was sort of obsessed, like a lot of the faculty were, with this story of Sam the Banana Man, the Russian immigrant, 6'3" Russian Jew who came from Bessarabia, Russia, and settled in Selma, Alabama, and fell in love with bananas and started selling these overripe bananas, and by selling overripe bananas ultimately made $100,000 by the time he was 18. And he told this story to us first and foremost, I think, because this was the kind of guy that Saul Bellow wrote about, but for real.
Sam Zemurray saw his first banana in 1893. What did he think? How did he... And bananas were exotic then. You couldn't buy them in every, there were no big grocery stores. Give me the state of bananas, Rich, if you would, in 1893. The state of the bananas being sold in America, because they're not grown here, which is another interesting aspect.
Right. In the 1870s, bananas were like the Beatles playing in a pub in Liverpool, basically. They were going to be huge, but nobody knew it yet. The first introduction of bananas, really, the first time you see them written about in America is at a World Exposition in the 1870s in Philadelphia, when they were sold by the slice, wrapped up individually, 10 cents a slice, and they were like the most exotic thing you could find in Whole Fruits. Bananas tended to be consumed within a mile of where they were picked. They were picked, and then they ripened in a ripening room, and the reason is because before you had a steamship, you could never get them to the United States in time to consume them. So really it wasn't until random traders heading down to the Caribbean started buying these things, and famously one of the guys that founded United Fruit, whose ship had been damaged, and he was in Jamaica with his ship in dry dock, and he spotted these yellow things, and he said, "What are those?" And he said, "Okay, give me 1,000 of them or something." And he got this incredibly favorable wind and brought them to Jersey City. And by the way, that was one of the guys, Lorenzo Baker, who founded United Fruit. And when he first saw bananas, he was drinking Planter's Punch on the dock in Jamaica, and that became the house drink of United Fruit.
United Fruit, as Rich makes a point, becomes... How many of you know anything about the history of bananas or United Fruit? You ever work for United Fruit? This is why you have to buy this book. There are revelations aplenty in here, and enough characters for a really good John Ford Western, I think, or in many cases a Fellini movie. Murray, I'm going to read a little something that Rich writes in here. What I took from Murray's story and what made it redeeming was not the evils and excesses of United Fruit, but the optimism that characterized his life, the belief that he could indeed be both triumphant and love. If you want to understand the spirit of our nation, the good and bad, you can enroll in college, sign up for classes, take notes, and pay tuition, or you can study the life of Sam, the Banana Man. Set him in his youth. He's a hustler. Destiny that he finds bananas, or do you think, Rich, that had he found some other kind of business that he would have been successful? Because this is a character out of a great novel. What do you think? I mean, was it serendipity? Was it good fortune? It was bananas as opposed to oil wells or something?
Right. I mean, I kind of believe character is destiny. So if it hadn't been bananas, if he had been in a different part of the country, he would have been successful with something else. He grew up until he was about 14 on a wheat farm in western Russia, and his father died, and he was sent to the United States to sort of make money and bring his siblings over, and that's a huge responsibility, and he had to find a way to make money, and starting with nothing, he went to Mobile, Alabama. He saw this banana. He fell in love with it. He went to Mobile, Alabama to see where the big banana ships came in. And he noticed that the Boston Fruit Company would take the bananas, and they would take the green bananas and put them in one set of boxcars, the sort of middle bananas in another set, and then they took these yellow bananas that looked like this. I mean, the bananas you'd choose to eat, and they threw them in a big pile. And he said, "What's that?" And they said, "Those are the ripes. You can never get them to market in time before they'll go bad." And the definition was 1 freckle turning, 2 freckles ripe. And he said, "What do you do with them?" They said, "They're trash. We throw them in the sea." And he said, "I will buy the trash." And it's kind of like one man's trash is another man's treasure. He bet that he could hustle enough to sell the ripening, rotten bananas. And he did it ultimately by devising a system where he rented space on the Illinois Central train and sold them right out of the boxcars. The guys who ran the supermarkets, he'd wire ahead, and the peddlers and the supermarket people would come to him. And the New York Times, they said that he used boxcars like they were push carts, selling his bananas.
One of the other things, we'll be all over the map here, but one of the highlights, joyful highlights for me in Rich's research is that the newspapers at this time were unbelievable in charting, and we'll get to Central America and all that stuff. Were you surprised by how helpful they were, old news clippings, in charting this story that, frankly, I'd never even heard of this guy before? Yeah,
I mean, first of all, there's a whole spirit about the newspapers. It's sort of like the beginning. One thing I liked about it was, you sort of mentioned it, it's a story, the longevity of it. You start in like John Ford's vision of America, old cowboy America, and you end up kind of in John le Carré's America. You end up in the Cold War, and you start in the Wild West. And Honduras was really they're still seen by a lot of people as part of the American frontier. And when the American frontier closed, a lot of those sort of cowboys went down to Central America, and they were called banana cowboys. And the newspapers covered it like it was Rudyard Kipling's America, like it was a great big adventure. And they wrote about these incredible, colorful characters who were around at the beginning of the banana business. And the term Banana Republic, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but Puerto Cortez, Honduras, had no extradition treaty to the United States. So it became a place where American criminals on the lam would go hide out. There was an article in the New York Times, I think it was called like a haven of destitutes or haven of skullduggery or something. And one of the criminals that was hiding out ended up writing a bunch of short stories about the scene, and that guy used a pen name when he published these stories, and it's O. Henry. And his first book was called Cabbages and Kings, and it was about the banana company, the Vesuvius Banana Company, I think, and it used the term Banana Republic for the first time.
When Sam, by 1899, he sold 20,000 bananas. By 1903, he sold 574,000 bananas. Within a decade, he would be selling more than 1,000 a year. Give us a sense of where the bananas were being grown. There were a number of, and you detail it in here in this amazing book, The Fish That Ate the Whale. There were a number of companies. I mean, a lot of companies, right?
Right.
How were they operating and where were they operating?
Well, they were operating all over Central America, mostly in Nicaragua.